Hey everyone. I've been thinking a lot, long term and short term, about the situation online, social media, misinformation, information, all that stuff. And in an Adderall fueled moment of clarity, we'll call it. I'm an adult with ADHD, so I take Adderall every day. And so usually in the mornings, I feel the most benefit from it. I'm able to think clearly, or the most clearest, or whatever the proper English is. And it all just sort of came together for me this morning as I was cooking breakfast and accidentally set fire to a paper towel, but that's another story. So whether or not this was my clearest thinking is the jury's out on that. But it's I think everybody knows what is like. People seem to realize that there's a disturbance in the force in social media, and it's been there for a while, and it just keeps growing, and it's to the point now where it's um, the I really feel that the longer you're on social media, the more impossible it becomes to keep your friends. Um, and I truly believe this because the architecture of social media uh, is such that good communication is just impossible. High quality communication that we crave, that we need, is not possible. And especially with all the COVID stuff, the pandemic, and everybody is now isolated, what we've done is we've removed people from, we've greatly reduced all the interpersonal, human to human, same room uh, communication. And as a result, we're all trying to now function as a planet, as a country, as a state, as a city, as a neighborhood, as a family, uh, using inadequate communication. And the word misinformation has been a buzzword for the last 4 years. It's been politically hijacked. We know, everybody knows exactly what it is I'm pointing to, right? So, and it's been, I've been thinking about this off and on, uh, trying to really just get to the deep core of it. And it's always been it's been murky waters for me to navigate. But this morning, I think it finally hit me. And so that's what I want to talk about. And this is probably more subjective than anything. So I did not go to Webster's dictionary, and I didn't go to Urban Dictionary or Wikipedia or Britannica or Encyclopedia or all the pedias, whatever. Uh, but I want to talk about wisdom, knowledge, and information, and how those three things interact. Because it's very important, right? Because when we think of wisdom, we think of somebody who is smart, good decisions, winners, people that know what to do. They've got their act together, right? They're very wise. The whole stories of King Solomon. If you've heard those stories about how he was the wisest king in all of kingness. But the other two are kind of sort of, when you say knowledge, nothing really comes to mind, at least not for me, right? Whenever I hear the word wisdom, there's a lot that comes with that word. And maybe it's just the way I was raised, but maybe not. When somebody says knowledge, that doesn't really have any kind of impact like the word wisdom does. And let alone when you say information, that's even weaker of a word. And so, but in thinking about information and misinformation and trying to dice it out and sort it out, I landed on these other two words, knowledge and wisdom, right? So information it's really just, well, data, and I hate to use a computer term, but it's more than just that, right? So when we think of information, at the most basic level, we are a biological entity that processes information through five senses: sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch. I'm a little rusty on my biology, sorry, but generally, those are the five senses, right? So touch is physical contact. Hearing is we're basically decoding vibrations in the air, or we're perceiving vibrations in the air, and it's getting reported to our brains, right? Sight is receiving electromagnetic radio wave frequency radiation from the universe, and within that a very narrow bandwidth of wavelengths that compose of visible light. But there's other wavelengths that we are not visible, that we don't generally perceive or detect. We can detect infrared as heat if there's enough of it, and we can detect ultraviolet as sunburn when there's enough of it, right? So those are the neighbors of visible light, right? So, but then our consciousness, our awareness, the center of us, is the aggregation of five types of information in real time. Okay, so somewhere in our consciousness, we're not even 100% sure that it occurs in the brain, but we know that the brain is a big part of it. Our consciousness, our awareness may or may not be centered in the brain. It may be spread through our bodies, and it may not entirely be within our bodies. We don't know. There's higher dimensions than just these four that we're so used to. But information by itself, in and of itself, it just exists. It's just there. So to say something is information versus misinformation, well, what is misinformation? And I tried to think of this in terms of just basic senses, right? What would misinformation be like in terms of sight, in terms of hearing, in terms of taste or smell or touch, right? And what came to mind was things like practical jokes, right? Like making candy apples or caramel apples, but one of them's not an apple, it's an onion, and you give that to somebody that you generally dislike or that you want to prank, okay? That would be an example of misinformation in the physical world, where, it's information that is presented in a deceptive manner. But what makes it deceptive? And that's where I landed on knowledge, okay? So with information, knowledge becomes it's a familiarity with a specific type of information or a specific combination of information that we become familiar with. It becomes useful to us. It becomes valuable familiarity with which we go forward into our lives, right? So knowledge would be spoken language, okay? You're hearing my voice. We hear each other speak. But knowledge is more related to being able to understand the language, okay? Because if you don't speak English, you're probably not watching this video by now, okay? And if you've ever seen anything in a foreign language that you don't understand, and I'm sure you have, you don't have that knowledge, so you start to miss out on certain things, okay? My wife's family is from Mexico. Not everybody speaks English. And so we have Spanish channels on our television. And I do speak Spanish. I understand it about as well as a white guy can. I think I understand it and speak it better than many white people, but I'm certainly not, I'm not at that level where I could go to Mexico and have the normal life, right? I would need help. But knowledge, then, is being able to recognize patterns within that information and to make it useful. Okay, we know how to walk, we know how to run, we know how to ride a bike, we know how to drive a car, we know how to make babies, and that knowledge comes for free with biology. But yeah, so and Colin Powell was famous for saying, we know what we know what we don't know, but then there's also the things that we don't know we know, and then there's the things that we don't know that we don't know. And when he said that, it didn't make sense to a lot of people. And I'm not even sure that many people are still familiar with that quote. If you think in terms of reading a book, it makes a lot more sense. If you're reading a book, say Dean Koontz, one of his murder mystery horror type books, if you've made it about halfway through the book, say chapter 5 out of 10, you know what you know. You know what's happened in chapters 1 through 5. You know what you don't know. You don't know what happens in chapters 6 through 10. Right? So we know half the book, and we know that we don't know the other half of the book, right? And so that's what drives people to read the books, because you want to find out. You're curious. Okay, but then you don't know what you know, right? So you've read chapters 1 through 5. You know that there's a cast of characters. You know that some shit went down. You don't know who did it, right? And we know this. Right? So we know that we don't know that. But then there's usually a plot twist, right? That comes. And so we don't know. So an example of we don't know what we don't know. We don't know that this little innocuous, relatively mundane detail at the beginning of the book is going to play out in a major way in the plot twist at the end. See, we don't know that. We do know that this little mundane thing happened. That's part of the knowledge that we know. But we don't know we don't know that this is going to be important, right? So that's knowledge, and that's a great way of identifying gaps in knowledge, right? And so then wisdom builds on top of that, in my mind at least. When you think of wisdom as somebody who has attained a substantial amount of knowledge about the world around them, how the world works, how people work, things, places, people, places, things. And the whole King Solomon being able to make good decisions based on knowledge. There's a good example. There's a good saying that says, in order to avoid making mistakes, to prevent making mistakes, you must have good judgment. To have good judgment, good judgment comes from making mistakes, right? Mistakes come from bad judgment. And so the way that you fix bad judgment is by making those mistakes, but learning from them so that you have good judgment from then on out. And so to make mistakes, you have to have made a decision based on incomplete information or misinformation or one of those gaps in information. So you see how all of this builds up. But the core foundation of it is based on information. And when information is misleading, when you have misinformation, it may be misleading to some, but to others it might make sense. We are a big planet. Something that is valid information for one person might be invalid information for another. Case in point, weather forecasts and things like major winter storms blowing through Texas and shutting the power grid down. Okay? What might be good information for somebody might be misinformation for another. You know, if you talk to somebody that's up in Antarctica and they say, look out, man, up in Alaska. I need to look at a globe soon. You see what I mean? Somebody who is in a very, very cold part of the world might be facing a winter storm. And they might say, hey, you need to prepare, hunker down. There's a major winter storm coming. And you're like, yeah, I'm in Texas. Thanks for that information. And the next thing you know, Texas freezes over and shit hits the fan. Okay? But the issue that we're facing, because I think we all feel like we're all getting dumber, like society is getting dumber as a whole. We're becoming more volatile, more emotive, more extra. Okay? And I think, and this is my view, because knowledge and wisdom are built upon information and the quality of that information. And so we know that the internet has grown at a phenomenal pace. There are shit tons of data out there. Everybody has a smartphone. Everybody has an opinion. It's nearly impossible now to sift through all of the low quality information and misinformation to get to any useful information. And that's crippling us because we begin to build our knowledge upon a poor foundation of information, we'll call it. Don't build your house upon the sand, right? That's a pretty good metaphor. As more information starts getting put out there by people with phones and anybody who happens to have an opinion, and it's all processed through algorithms, that the only thing social media algorithms care about is what holds your attention the longest. The algorithms don't work based on quality of information. Those algorithms work based on what will you watch the longest. And if it's bad information, those algorithms pull people to bad information, and then their core knowledge, that their knowledge and understanding of the world is now poisoned, tainted, and weakened because these algorithms have steered people to the incorrect information. Now, as much as I hate the censorship that social media is exercising, I also think in the long term, it's a good thing that is still in its infancy. And like an infant, it's making poor decisions, behaving badly, and screaming and crying and just being a bother, right? Like, everybody loves a baby until you're stuck on a plane with one that's upset, right? So it's not my baby, therefore I hate it, even though it's cute. This concept of filtering out misinformation, it's in its infancy, but in the long term, I think it's going to, I hope it's going to mature and develop into something that really pays attention to quality of information. I think we all recognize that there's far too much low quality information out there. And so with so much bad information, we can't attain the proper knowledge that we need to exist in our little pinpoint of the globe. Okay, because we have to sift through information that comes from all around the globe, and everybody's got an opinion, and there's so much of it. And a lot of it's just not going to be useful to us. How do we find what's useful? And then the less knowledge we have, we very well might think we're correct because this worked for somebody somewhere else, and they're like they claim that it works well, and it just might not work for them. It might not work for you. But then you go and you retell this to somebody else. There's still a chance that what worked for you doesn't work for them. So it works two ways. We're all stewards of the information we put out there. But we don't have the wisdom to properly curate the information that we ingest, process, and share, we'll say. People don't curate it enough. And even when we try, we don't always curate it correctly because we're not as wise as we once were, because we've already allowed low quality information to poison our knowledge. And as our knowledge becomes weaker, we are now less effective at curating our information. And therefore, it becomes more challenging to exercise proper wisdom. And so because of that, we're all getting dumber. I uninstalled all of my social media except for YouTube, obviously. If I need to follow a link, I just use the browser on my phone. But I don't install the apps. I don't want notifications, and I'm done with it. And I've been off of it for a month. And I gotta be honest, I'm happier than I've been in a long time. I don't feel like I'm going crazy anymore, not like I used to. I don't miss it. You know, for a while I just uninstalled Facebook and I did the whole thing like, okay, well, let's look at the other platforms like MeWe and Parler and Telegram and maybe Twitter, Instagram, all the grams and snaps, thingamajigs. And they work. There's something missing. And at first I thought it was like, well, they're just not as feature rich as Facebook. And then I came to realize that no, they just don't have all of the addictive designs that are in Facebook. So Facebook is highly popular because it's addictive, right? When you're on a social media app that's not nearly as addictive, you're just not gonna use it as much or enjoy it. And that was a huge epiphany for me. And so it's like using MeWe or Parler or Telegram or one of these grams. It's just not it's not what you crave, right? It lacks electrolytes. It's what plants crave. I recognized that it's like giving alcohol-free beer to an alcoholic and saying, here, you can still enjoy beer, but you don't have to worry about all the negative effects of alcohol. Well, is an alcoholic really going to appreciate that? No, because it's got many of the familiar experiences of beer. Tastes pretty much very similar. Same consistency, a nice cold glass of beer, you know, but a big part of the experience is missing from it, right? It's hollow. That alcoholic's not going to want to drink it at all. Like, I would rather just not drink beer, period, even if it's non-alcoholic, because non-alcoholic beer is actually less satisfying than a glass of ice water. And to somebody who doesn't know, who doesn't have the proper wisdom, you have the knowledge, you like beer. I know that there's non-alcoholic beer, so I'll give that to you. But that's poor wisdom, right? Because the lacking of experience. And I feel that that's where a lot of people are right now. So I uninstalled all the social media except YouTube because I felt like without Facebook, I'm that recovering alcoholic that attempted to change my habits to non-alcoholic beer. And at the end of the day, I'd just rather not. And same as any recovering addict, I'm in a good place. And so I've been reflecting on these things for a while, and I just wanted to share it. And I realized this is a long video. And if you've made it this far, congratulations. I don't know that anybody would really listen to me talk for that long, but if you did, I fucking appreciate you. You're awesome. And I want to hear from you. So anyways, I'm gonna shut up, but do please like, comment, or share. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I always love to read comments from people, so post your comments because I never leave home. So Thanks again, and I'll see you guys on the next video.